If the barrel is placed on a strong platform, the weight of the water creates gentle pressure. It will not run a sprinkler and it will not blast water across the garden, but that is exactly the point. Plants do not need drama. They need steady moisture at the roots. A gravity-fed system can be as simple as an elevated barrel connected to a soaker hose or a perforated line running along the base of the plants. When the valve is opened, water slowly moves through the line and seeps into the soil. There is no pump, no electricity, no timer, and no connection to household plumbing. It is quiet, slow, and efficient. The water goes where it is needed instead of being sprayed into the air, blown by wind, or evaporated before it ever reaches the roots. This was one of the first Amish-inspired ideas I tried in my own garden, and I will be honest, at first I did not trust it. The water moved so slowly that I kept thinking it could not possibly be enough. I was used to seeing water spray everywhere, and that looked like progress. But plants do not measure progress by how dramatic the watering looks. They respond to what happens in the soil. That first season, my tomato plants stayed more evenly hydrated than they had with my old hose routine, and I spent far less time fighting with equipment. The reason this works so well is that water delivered slowly at the soil surface has time to soak in. With overhead watering, especially from a sprinkler, a lot of water never reaches the root zone. Some evaporates in the air. Some lands on leaves. Some lands between the plants. Some runs off the surface if the soil is dry, compacted, or heavy with clay. But when water is released gently near the base of the plants, it enters the soil where the roots can actually use it. This leads to one of the most important Amish watering principles: water the soil, not the plant. For years, I watered from above because it looked thorough. I would stand there with a hose and spray the leaves, the stems, the flowers, and everything around them. The plants looked refreshed, and I felt like I had done a good job. But in reality, much of that water was not helping as much as I thought. Worse, wet leaf can create conditions where fungal diseases spread more easily, especially if the foliage stays damp into the evening. Amish gardeners tend to water low and slow. Whether they are using a watering can, a bucket, or a gravity-fed line, the goal is the same: place the water at the soil line and give it time to sink in. This is especially important for plants like tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, peppers, and beans, which can all suffer when leaves stay wet too often. Keeping the foliage drier while watering the root zone is one of the simplest ways to reduce disease pressure in a vegetable garden. You can test this in your own garden very easily. Water one row from above the way many gardeners usually do, then water another row slowly at the base of the plants. Come back a couple of hours later and push your finger into the soil. The overhead watered row may look damp on top, but still be dry below the surface. The soil level row is much more likely to be moist where the roots are actually growing. Once you feel that difference with your own hand, it becomes hard to go back to spraying everything from above. Timing also matters. The best time to water is early morning, when the air is cool, the wind is usually calmer, and evaporation is lower. Morning watering gives plants moisture before the heat of the day arrives, and if a few leaves do get splashed, they have time to dry before night. Evening watering can work when necessary, but if foliage stays wet overnight, disease problems can become more likely. The Amish rhythm of life naturally supports early watering because much of the day's work begins early, but the principle applies to anyone. Another important difference is that Amish gardeners do not rely blindly on a schedule. Many modern gardeners use timers because timers are convenient, but a timer cannot feel the soil. It cannot know whether yesterday's rain soaked deeply or only wet the surface. It cannot tell whether mulch is still holding moisture underneath. The Amish approach is more observational. They check the soil, not the clock. If the soil is dry a couple of inches down, it is time to water. If it's still moist, they wait. That waiting is important because plants need encouragement to grow deeper roots. If you water lightly every day, roots often stay near the surface where moisture is easy to find. But surface roots are vulnerable during hot weather because the top layer of soil dries quickly. When you water more deeply and less often, roots are encouraged to reach downward. Over time, the plant becomes stronger and better able to handle dry spells. This is one of those simple gardening truths that sounds obvious once you hear it, but many of us learn it only after years of doing the opposite. Of course, none of these methods work as well if the soil itself cannot hold moisture. This may be the most important part of the whole Amish system. Rain barrels help. Gravity-fed watering helps. Soil-level watering helps. But the true reservoir in the garden is the soil. If the soil is poor, compacted, or low in organic matter, water passes through too quickly or runs away from the surface. If the soil is rich, alive, and protected, it can hold moisture much longer. Amish gardens often have a major advantage because the soil has been cared for year after year. Compost, animal manure, leaves, straw, crop residue, and kitchen scraps are returned to the earth again and again. Over time, that creates soil that behaves very differently from ordinary tired garden dirt. It becomes darker, looser, more alive, and better able to absorb and store water. Soil scientists often talk about aggregation, which means that soil particles form small clumps with tiny spaces between them. Those spaces allow water and air to move through the soil in a healthy way. That kind of soil acts like a sponge. When rain falls or water is added, the soil absorbs it and holds it in a form that roots can use. It does not become muddy as quickly, and it does not dry out as fast. Earthworms create channels. Microbes break down organic matter. Plant roots move through the soil more easily. Everything works together. This is why two gardens can receive the same amount of water and have completely different results. One dries out almost immediately, while the other stays moist for days. You can begin building this kind of soil in your own garden by adding finished compost every season. You do not need perfect compost, and you do not need to transform the entire garden at once. Start with the beds where your most important crops grow. Work a few inches of compost into the upper layer of soil in spring and continue adding organic matter whenever you can. Over time, the structure improves. The soil becomes easier to work, easier for roots to enter, and better at holding moisture. Mulch is the next layer of protection, and it may be one of the simplest water-saving tools available. Amish gardeners commonly use straw because it is practical, affordable in many rural areas, and effective. A layer of straw over the soil shades it from direct sun, slows evaporation, reduces crusting after heavy rain, and helps keep the root zone cooler during hot weather. As the straw breaks down, it adds more organic matter back into the soil. That means mulch is not just protection for this season. It is also an investment in next season's soil. Other organic mulches can work too. Shredded leaves are excellent. Grass clippings can be useful when applied in thin layers, so they do not mat together. Wood chips are very helpful in pathways and around perennial plantings, though they should be used carefully around annual vegetable rows. The exact material matters less than the principle. Do not leave the soil naked. Bare soil loses moisture constantly. Mulch soil holds it. When I finally began mulching my vegetable beds seriously,